everyone. We've been through most of the Pesach holiday, and we've examined the connection we have with Hashem going back to that point in time. In fact, we've made it our business to focus on that connection and to grow it. Indeed, on the Seder nights, we begin by noting Kol hamarbe l'saper b'yitzias Mitzrayim hareze meshubach. The more that we elaborate on the Yitzias Mitzrayim story during Chag HaPesach, the better off it is. And how can one mention Yitzias Mitzrayim without mentioning Moshe? But that's exactly what we do. We don't mention Moshe in the Haggadah except in one instance. We also don't focus on his role in the process throughout the Chag, except as a side player. Why is Moshe conspicuously absent from the majority of the Pesach celebration? And as we enter the final days of Pesach, I wish to recall Moshe. What was his greatest as the leader? The Torah tells us that Vayigdal Moshe, Vayetzei el Achav, Vayar b'Sivlosam. That when Moshe grew up, he went out to visit his brothers, and he saw them in their hard work. Rashi immediately comments that Moshe's greatest attribute was that he was empathic. But the Medrash Rabbah in Shir Hashirim goes one step further. Mahu Vayar, asks the Medrash, what does the word Vayar and he saw come to teach us? It teaches us that Moshe was not only moved to empathy, he was moved to do something about it. And we derive all of this from the simple word Vayar. But how are we to deduce that? They tell a story of a man walking in the middle of a busy highway. The traffic was swerving all around him to try to avoid him, and the horns were all honking around him as they passed him. And finally the man turns and starts yelling at all the people honking, "Stop honking! I hear you already!" And finally one exasperated driver rolls down his window and yells at the man, "We know you heard us! What are you doing about it?" Yisro was one who heard a honk. When the Torah tells us that Yisro heard, Rashi famously asks, Mashmua Shama Uva. What was it that he heard that motivated him to do something about it? And Rashi answers that he had heard about the splitting of the Yam Suf and the battle with Amalek. Shama, he heard, Uba, and he came. He responded. And the same thing can be said throughout the great life of Moshe Rabbeinu. Whether at the Sneh, when he said, Asura no ve'ereh, I'll do something about what I saw, or even when he was younger as a prince in the palace, Moshe realized that simply crying is not going to be enough. He needed to do something. Vayar b'Sivlosam, the Torah tells us. It cannot be simply a message of empathy. Haya nosein kseifav u'mesayeya. The Medrash comments, he put his shoulder to it and he helped out. It was a crying that led to an action. That's what it means, Vayar b'Sivlosam. The late great Maggid of Yerushalayim, Rav Shalom Shvadron, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, noted similarly that we too often hear the noise, but we're too tied up in the traffic jams of life and remain unable to stop to listen to the noise and to figure out and choose to do something about it. And the last days of Yom Tov, coming after a quieting of the hustle and the bustle, are a prime time to nail down the messages gleaned from Yom Tov. If we gained anything from this Yom Tov, perhaps over the last year as a whole, it was that value and the importance of being together. Whether the value was important to us because it was taken from us last year, or because of the opportunity, with the proper precautions and social distancing, to be together somewhat more this year, we can appreciate more than before what we mean to one another. We have come to appreciate the value of our place of gathering, our beloved Beis HaKnesses, where we gather as Adath Israel, considering each other in our minds, in our thoughts, and especially in our tefillos, especially when we need it most. But this state of being together requires us to do something and make practical the lessons of togetherness, to make sure that we prove that we hear and that we remain here as Adath Israel, as Adas Yisrael, Ad Bias Goel, until the time for us to move comes along. My Rebbe, Rav Shechter, regularly reminded us that on the final days of a Chag, the community members would be approached to make a pledge for the communal needs, often depleted due to the needs of the Chag. The entire community would respond, and many did so in memory of loved ones. This, said Rav Shechter, is how Yizkor was born. The appeal, noted Rav Shechter, preceded the Yizkor and applied to the entire community, not just those with loved ones to recall. And everyone responded, as we read in the Torah reading of the 8th day of Pesach, Ish kematnas yado, each according to his or her ability. This weekend, I ask that you all respond to the needs of the community's centerpiece, our beloved shul, where we have turned for guidance, for advice, for respite, for knowledge, for camaraderie, for solace and sanctuary, especially in these tough times. When we've needed it most, our shul has been there to respond. And in the merit of our collective tzedakah, may we merit to hear and respond to the greatest honking sound of them all, the great shofar that will herald in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. May it be built speedily in our days, and may we all go arm in arm to have the opportunity to get there. Wishing you and your loved ones a wonderful Shabbat Shalom and a Chag Sameach to all.